July 31st, 2013, I'm interviewing Linda Arroyo Holmstrom. My name is Ubaldo Valdez, and I'm assisted by Daisy De Luna as the videographer for today's discussion. Good morning, Linda.
Good morning.
We're going to start, most of these questions are general in nature, and you're welcome to add or delete any portion that you wish with respect to the question. Linda, when were you born and where were you born?
First of all, I want to thank both of you for coming to interview me, and I find it to be an honor, so thank you very much. I was born in Boulder, Colorado on July 27th, 1956.
And what do you remember about and share with us about your extended family? Where did they live, and when did they come to Boulder, and for what reasons? What compelled them to come into this area?
On both sides of my family, but my father's family, the Arroyo family, is the family that moved to Boulder, and that was in 1945. And they were, on both sides of the family, they were coal miners, and they lived in southern Colorado and near Sopris, and Sopris is under a reservoir near it's Trinidad Reservoir now, but in southern Colorado there were many coal mines, and they worked one mine till it was exhausted and closed down, and they moved to the next mine, and finally everything was shut down in that area. And so it was kind of a push factor, because there were some operating mines here in Boulder County, and there was the Washington mine and the Columbine mine. And so my grandfather, Jose Arroyo, came up here, and they lived in Lafayette for years, many years, until, well, they were back and forth to Mexico when my dad was an infant till he was about 7 years old, and then they settled in Lafayette, and they also, he worked the mines there. And so he befriended somebody, because the mine season, you know, during the winter they don't really, or I'm sorry, I think it's the winter, I always confuse it, they have a season when they're not working, so he did handyman jobs, and he worked for this Boulder attorney, and they became friends, and he helped him with, you know, the process of buying the house in Boulder. So that's how they ended up in Boulder.
And what can you tell us about your grandmother's side of the family?
My grandmother's side of the family, and by the way, my grandfather was Mexicano, and so he immigrated to the States when he was about 13 years old with his family. And so, but my grandmother's side of the family, they have been here for, we can trace back 7 generations to northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. So we're like natives of this area.
And her maiden name was?
Eloisa Martinez.
Martinez. From the Martinez family. Very good. And your father was born where?
My father was born in a mining camp, and it's called Broadhead. And it's on private land now, so we've tried to visit the site where he was born, but it was a mining camp. And that is also just probably 2 miles west of Aguilar, and which is 20 miles from Trinidad.
And your mother?
My mother was also born in a mining camp. She was born in Chandler, Colorado, which no longer exists either. And that is near, I believe, Canyon City, I think. Mm-hmm.
Tell us the stories that you heard about how they came together, how they met each other, your mom and your dad, and where did they marry, and then subsequently how and when did they move to Boulder County?
My dad grew up in Boulder, went to KC and Boulder High, and my mom, when they left Chandler, I believe she was about 10 years old, and they moved to Frederick, Colorado, which is just east of Boulder. It's Weld County. But her best friend was Jackie Schroeder. They went to school together. It was it's called the Tri-Towns. It was Dacono, Firestone, and Frederick. So everybody knew each other. And Jackie's boyfriend was John Schroeder. And John and my dad were best friends. They went to Boulder High School together. And so John was dating Jackie, and he'd go visit her, and he eventually met my mother, because Jackie and my mom were best friends. And so he thought, boy, Diana would be the perfect woman for Pat. And so he introduced my father to my mother, and that's when they started dating after that, and eventually were married, I think about a year later. And so when they got married, they lived with my paternal grandparents, the Arroyos, in Boulder. And so that's how my mother ended up coming to Boulder. And then, the jobs during that time, and I'm trying to remember when they got married. They've been married 62 years now. So subtract that, and I'm not sure what year that was, but the economy was pretty bad then. So my dad was moving from one job to another, to like Commerce City, to Derby, to Pueblo, back to Boulder, so he went all over. In fact, the first 8 year, I think we had moved 8 times by the time I was 8 years old. So, and he was following the job market.
Very good. With that, let's move to your immediate family now.
Mm-hmm.
And tell me, if you would, about your immediate family. Tell us about your siblings and where you fall in that order.
Mm-hmm.
And then talk to us about the dynamics within your immediate family.
Okay. Well, I feel like within the dynamics of my immediate family, it almost seemed like my extended family was my immediate family, because we would get together every Sunday. It was church, and then after that, everyone would meet at my grandparents' house, the Arroyo's house, and we'd all eat together. And that was just typical. And we, of course, celebrated every birthday. So I had 18 first cousins in Boulder. And so, that was my social life too, is that I didn't need anything other than my immediate and extended family. We were really close. And I guess the other dynamic was that we were so blessed because, I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional.
That's okay too. That part of it is very, very much a part of our discussion.
Like a happy emotion, though. I'm very blessed. I would leave my back door of my house, cross the alley, and I would be at my grandparents' house.
And was this the home where your parents now live?
Yeah, my parents still live in the same house. And yes, they live on 2041 Walnut Street. And my grandparents lived on 2040 Pearl Street. And so it wasn't just my grandparents, it was, oh, sorry.
With that information in it, tell me about the physical movement between one home and the other. What was your comfort level at one home versus the other? What needed to be cleared before you went to go see Grandma or be at Grandma's house?
Nothing. It was like you would hear that back door slam, the screen door, and I was off. There wasn't, my grandparents, it was my home. And so I was so loved.
And did some of your cousins, your uncles, your aunts, did they also live in the area where you could easily move from one house to the other?
No, they weren't as blessed as we were. But, everybody, my grandparents' home was open, always. And I don't know how they did it, because, Grandma would start making tortillas, make a big bowl of masa tortillas, and she'd be rolling them, and that stack never grew because one person after another would be taking those tortillas, and so they were feeding everybody. Anybody would come in, drop in. It was just the center of our universe, really. And there were no lines. Nothing had to be cleared. It was just the beauty of being family.
Mm-hmm. Did you find that the community in which you lived added to this comfort level?
The community, like, you mean the Latino community or the Anglo community?
Well, let's talk about the physical community, Boulder.
Boulder. Boulder was a small town then, and it was just, there was a hometown feeling to it, really safe. The kids would leave in the morning, and Mom would say, be back by 5 for dinner. And she'd pack us a lunch and we'd head off. We were never alone. We were always together as siblings. And I know your original question was about my immediate family. So my brother Patrick is 4 years older than I am. And my sister Candy's 2 years older. And then, so I was the third born. And my youngest brother Lucas is 14 years younger. So I was a baby for a long time. And just so you know, I have a nickname in the family as Crybaby, so I just lived up to it, okay?
Thank you for demonstrating that.
Were there other parts to the question that I guess
I now want to move to the, when I say community, the Hispanic community, your family in the midst of the Hispanic community that existed at any time during your life in Boulder, within the confines of Boulder?
I think it was my dad's generation, and when he was married to my mom too, that it was a really close-knit, tight community. Either they were related or they knew each other, or it was close proximity. Everybody lived in this one area of Boulder that was from like 17th to Folsom and Mapleton Avenue to about Arapahoe Avenue. So everyone lived close by. And so my dad's generation, I think they were really, really close. But my generation, there was still families living in the area. And I guess what I remember is, like I said, my extended family and my immediate family were my social life. So it wasn't until really junior high that I think I started associating more with, the neighborhood Latinos. And so we would walk to school together every day. It was Debbie Madrigal and Teresa Toledo. The three of us would, Debbie would come meet at my house, Teresa would meet at my house, and then from there we'd walk to Casey. And so, and then at school, you know how, I guess it's, when you have gente, you're sort of attracted to that gente. So, we met more from other elementary schools. So Teresa Lucero was another person. Cindy James was another one. And I went to grade school with Cindy. And so, we were social friends and did the typical teenage things together. At that time, it was Crossroads Shopping Center, the mall, and that was a big deal.
Very good. And the elementary school that you attended was?
Whittier. And I started Whittier when I was in 3rd grade. And then I went to Casey and Boulder High and then to CU Boulder.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Remembering your elementary school days, can you recall any one incident or a series of events that you can remember that made you a happy person, a happy child?
Well, it revolves around food, I guess. My mom would let me pick the lunches that I liked, and I would stay at school during lunchtime. But at that time, they would let you go home for lunch. So when I didn't like the lunch there, I would run home, and my mom would have lunch ready for me. And so those were highlights for me. Being able to run home either to mom or to grandma's house for lunch was just this wonderful break during my day. School to me was a struggle. I have, having dyslexia was just a real challenge for me. So my self-esteem in elementary school, was really low academically, but socially I was just a social butterfly. So I had strengths, but I also had weaknesses. So elementary school to me was hard. I don't have a lot of happy memories from elementary, but finally when I grasped the whole idea of reading, I just blossomed, and I just wanted to read everything I could find, and my whole world sort of shifted then. So knowing that I am capable, that even though I couldn't read, it didn't mean that I wasn't intelligent. And so that was a huge awakening for me.
Taking off from your personality, you've just described your personality as being a carefree, happy child, and then bringing in the challenges academically that you had. Can you think of beginning, let's say in junior high school, moving on to high school, and even into college, your role among your peer group, and how did that play out? And do you have any happy moments and or even sad moments, real challenges?
Yeah, there were a couple of things. I think when I was in 9th grade, I tried out for cheerleader. Remember how I told you I had those intimate friends, and they just thought I was really going to change and I would forget about them. And so they campaigned against me. And that was such a heartbreaker because I didn't make it to be cheerleader. I was the alternate cheerleader, but because of my friends, who I thought were my friends, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to kind of break out of the role. I think I was ambitious. I was motivated to do things and be social and be active. And so that really hurt. That was a huge lesson for me. But, in the long run, it was like taught me, well, what do you want in your friends? What kind of friends do you want, and who do you really value in life? And so, hard lesson, but a good one, too. I think another person or family that really helped me out was Cindy's family, and her mom was remarried and her name was James, but it was Carmen Hernandez and Cindy Hernandez who I think played a really prominent role in my life. My parents were rather strict, and they really wouldn't let us go outside of our extended family for social things. And Cindy and I were such close friends that I think they finally realized that it was okay, and they had met Cindy's parents, and so I went over there, and socioeconomic wise, they were definitely middle class to upper middle class family. And so they would take me skiing. I had opportunities with that family that I didn't really have with my own family. And then Carmen was an educator and was getting a degree to become an administrator, educational administrator. And so she would talk to me a lot about going to college. And so I think that was another awakening for me, like, I can go to college, why can't I? And so, and I think, I just didn't forget about it. It was impactful for me. I met this really successful Latina woman who encouraged me. So I kind of think she was a friend, but a mentor too.
Are you describing an incident or a series of incidents that maybe gave you the insight of a larger world beyond what you had known up to this point? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I hadn't really thought about college at all. My parents were, bless their hearts, they definitely valued education. But I think their experiences, they went to high school, so they expected the same thing from us. Graduate from high school, that was their goal. So I didn't really know the world beyond that. And because socioeconomically, I didn't believe I could go because of finances too. And so that wasn't really a part of my framework of.
Your older siblings, they were not modeling that for you?
No. No, my brother Pat modeled a really wonderful work ethic. He started working at Safeway when he was 16. And, you know, we all had a really great work ethic because we contributed to the family to help support the family. And so we all started working when we were young. My sister, you know, she's only 2 years older than me, but another big shift was when my sister, she had a friend who worked for the Migrant Action Program at the University of Colorado, and he, you know, was dating my sister, and he told her, "Do you want to go to school?" And she goes, "Yeah, sure, I want to go to the university." And so he helped her with the whole process of applying. And so once I knew my sister could go, then I'm like, I'm going too. So that door of access was shown to me, and then it was like, I'm going to go too. I don't think Boulder High prepared me for it, because back then there was definitely tracks they would put you through. So I was on the secretarial track. I was not on the college path. So thank goodness during the 70s, and you know, I graduated from 1974 from Boulder High, there was so much, there were so many programs there to help students just like me who really weren't on the college path, didn't have the coursework, didn't really have the scores to on the ACTs to be accepted. Well, they waived that. And they looked at your, I think, your motivation and your interest, and if you made it through the application process. And then they had a summer program too that really kind of weeded students out. You know, I took 3 classes: English composition class, sociology, and math. And you know, that kind of, you had to prove yourself. So that was like a preparatory type. We got college credit for it. So it prepared you that summer and kind of let you know what the expectations were if you were going to stay in college. So that program really made a difference for me. It was like, okay, I can do this, you know. And they had the support that you needed. They had TAs. I remember I was living at home because I was in, you know, I grew up in Boulder, so I could live at home. I didn't choose to live in the dorm. And I was sick, so I stayed home. Well, knock, knock, knock. Somebody from the MAP program was at my door wanting to know why I wasn't in classes. And I said, I'm sick, that's why. And so, I mean, they went to that extent of, you know, going to the dorms, going to wherever you were at to say, come on, you got to be in class. And so, but I was a student that didn't need that, you know. I did need that summer program, though. Writing every day really made a difference.
Very good. Before we leave the big picture, so to speak, about the larger community in which you grew up, and know that we're going to move into a discussion of your career and what were some of the highlights of your career. Tell us about the impression that you had, whether it's political, religiously, civic, or social environment in which you grew up in Boulder. How would you describe that?
Well, you know, religion was definitely a part of our upbringing. But I don't think it, I think it nourished something about us or nurtured something about us, but I don't think it really like dictated our lives. Politically, you know, there was a lot going on campus when I was growing up, and definitely we were discouraged from getting involved in it. It was too radical, too much going on. And so I think the political part was just, you know, the family finding work that could support their, you know, support their families. And it was more if we engaged with the community, it was more on a social level rather than a political level. I didn't get into the political stuff until I was a CU student. So the larger community, I think, I think more than anything, it was like to tell you that you weren't alone. You know, that you could relate to their struggles or to their families, their culture. It was like living in two worlds, because at home it was so different than school. And so you knew they were also experiencing the same thing. So you kind of had to traverse between two cultures, two worlds.
I think you've already touched on much of what has been your inspiration throughout your life. But we all know that you had an impressive career in the field of education.
Thank you.
Talk to us about what inspired you to go into education. You've touched on it already, but can you go into a little bit more detail? What were some of the highlights of that career?
I think the fact that I struggled so much with reading, I was inspired. I was like, I want to become a teacher so I can help other young students who are experiencing what I did and help them. And so, and I also was a strong advocate in that of bilingual education. And so my first job out of high school, I taught for the Migrant summer program in Longmont at Loma Linda Elementary School, and I was a preschool teacher, so that was my first job. And so I think that inspired me too. It was like there was such a need for bilingual teachers that, and I was such a believer in being bilingual too. So that's part of my inspiration, was just becoming an educator. It was to serve the community, and particularly the Latino community. You know, I think that part of the story too is I grew up in a time, my generation, we lost the language. We lost Spanish. You know, even though my grandparents were very bilingual and spoke Spanish a lot, I understood it, but didn't really speak it. And my mom really didn't learn to speak Spanish until she lived with my dad's family. And my dad really struggled, and I think experienced a lot more racism and discrimination, where he really basically said, you can't speak Spanish. He did not want us speaking Spanish. He wanted us to acculturate as much as we could. And so, you know, that was another motivation going to college, is I want to become fluent in Spanish. And so I did. I mean, I'm nowhere near a native speaker, but I can read and write in Spanish and speak Spanish, and I understand it really well. So it's a lifelong goal to learn Spanish. And I forgot the rest of your question.
Well, a highlight of your career.
A highlight of my career. Well, you know, I won a couple awards. Those are definitely, you know, nice. I appreciate that. Yeah, nice acknowledgement. But really, the highlight to me were those aha moments for students when, as a teacher, you know, you delivered a lesson like in a way that they could really engage, and there was inquiry, there was conversation, there was intellect all involved. Those were the highlights.
Describe for us, if you would, your innermost feelings when you now come across a former student of yours that recognizes you, acknowledges you, comes up and reintroduces themselves to you,
Mm-hmm.
and wants to tell you where they are in their lives. What does that do to you?
Well, it's you always hope the best. You know, as a teacher, you really never know, you know, how you've impacted a student unless you have those wonderful encounters when they come up and they talk to you and they say, Miss, I'm so glad that you taught me about note-taking and organization. I wouldn't have made it through high school and college without those skills. And so those are the really, heartwarming moments.
Very good. Well, you're now a retired teacher. Without a doubt, there are still issues and projects that in your mind you want to pursue. And these are continued interests that you have. What does your world in the next 20 years look like?
Well, right now, I feel blessed that I can help my parents out, because they're getting older and they need a lot more support. So, that's part of my life now. And I try to fit other things in there. And I'm still doing contract work for the district because I have such an incredible passion for this pre-collegiate program called AVID. It stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. And so I'm continuing to mentor the AVID teachers within the school district. And I get to go into the classroom still, and actually I volunteer at a couple of schools, continue to, at middle schools. And so I want to stay connected to that community. And I feel like if you give the students the right tools and you have high expectations, they can reach any goal they want. And so I truly believe that, and I continue to, I'm lucky that I still have my foot in the door. I really enjoy that tremendously. And I also have a passion for history. And so this is a project that I'm also involved in. I get to interview some other community members, and I'm also involved in another history project with the Colorado History Center in Denver, and also with AARP, who there's an exhibit that's coming to Denver, and it's called 1968, and you have to kind of exhibit what was going on in your community at that time. And so the Chicano movement was alive and strong during that time. And so I am working on the soundtrack of the Chicano movement right now. So I'm working with Pocho Joe, who works for Cuvo, the radio station, a public radio station. And we're going to develop the soundtrack together for a reception that we're going to hold to kind of kick off the opening event for this 1968 exhibit. And so I am not idle at all. I feel like I'm really lucky. I'm young and I can still do so much, and I think there's so much to offer to the community. There's always a need. So it inspires me.
Very good. Well, you've certainly provided an inspiring picture of Linda Arroyo Holmstrom. Are there any other topics, any other subjects that you would like to comment on as we close this interview?
Well, I think not only my interview, but all the interviews that are being done at this time, I think are very important, because the Carnegie branch of the Public Library of Boulder is going to archive these videographs. And so I look at it this way, and I identify with my indigenous side, and I've been fortunate enough to know indigenous people who believe in 7 generations, future generations, that if you come from a place when you're always thinking, whatever you're doing, you're thinking about those future 7 generations. And so I feel like this really emphasizes that, because 7 generations later, hopefully my family will get to see this.
Well, we very much appreciate that through your eyes and through your recollections, we've gotten to see a bit of the Hispanic community that lived in Boulder in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So we thank you very much for that.
Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity. Thanks.
Postscript to an interview that we are having with Linda Arroyo Holmstrom. We want to talk a little bit now about those individuals in her life that influenced her. Tell us about some of the teachers or some of the people that you came across in your life that continue to be significant in who you are?
Oh, without a doubt, it's Anthony and Leticia de Lozano. They were incredible mentors, not only to me, but to, I would imagine, thousands of students. Their mission, when I was at the University of University of Boulder, University of Colorado at Boulder, sorry. My junior year, there was the opportunity to go to study abroad. Well, everyone knew about Dr. Lozano, Anthony Lozano, that he and his wife had this mission to capture our generation, the generation who ended up losing our language, which is such a significant part of our culture, that their mission was to recruit as many Chicano students as they could to attend this program, a study abroad program, an immersion program in Jalapa, Veracruz, Mexico. And this program would take, my sister's a prime example. I mean, I took Spanish in junior high, high school, and college. My sister didn't know, she never took it. And so she went to Jalapa not knowing a single word of, pretty much a single word of Spanish. And so this program was incredible. Every class was totally in Spanish. And so it was an immersion program, and they provided support for you. You lived with a host family, and you were just immersed in the language, the culture, everything. I mean, you didn't have a choice but to, out of survival too, to learn the language. And so Letty and Anthony, they would show up at my doorstep too. If we didn't show up to class, they were there, like, Linda, tú sabes mejor que nosotros que tienes que estar en clase. So they were always there for us. They had high expectations. They wanted us to leave being bilingual. And not only that, but just citizens of the world, to broaden our perspective about life. And I am so grateful to those two mentors. And they continue to mentor the community. So I have a deep respect for both of them.
In summarizing what you just said, let me ask you this. Do you recognize that you very likely have played the same role in the lives of somebody else that they did in yours?
Yeah, I think so. There's certain students, like just recently I went to Centara's graduation, and one of the students, Rosas, came up to me after this. They had a special event, graduation for the AVID students, and she told me, Miss, you made all the difference for me. She goes, I really wanted to give up on this program, that would, because it puts students on the college path. She goes, I really wanted to give up. She says, but you made all the difference, and now I'm going to college. And so, like I said, those moments do happen when you see former students, and you think you've made a difference, and that's your goal, but it's good to hear it, It's good to have that.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Linda.
Thank you.
Good.